The rancher turned down every woman, until an Apache widow asked, "You want a wife, or just shelter?" The rancher was a man of habit. Every morning, long before the sun had painted the sky with its golden colors, he was already awake. The world around him was quiet, almost peaceful, but he rarely noticed that peace. His mind was busy with the chores that demanded attention on his remote ranch. He lived alone, as he had for many years, and he liked it that way. The ranch stretched over miles of rolling land, dotted with fields, fences, and grazing cattle. It was beautiful in a rugged, untamed way, but it was also a demanding life, one that left little time for companionship or frivolous distractions. From the outside, people would say he was lucky. He had a good life, a ranch that provided everything he needed, and the satisfaction of work done with his own hands. But behind his strong, weathered face, there was a quiet loneliness. Not the kind that cried for attention, but a subtle ache. The one that comes when a person is surrounded by nature's beauty, yet walks through life with no one to share it with. The rancher had tried before. Many women had come into his life, each hoping to win his heart, each believing they could break through the walls he had built around himself. Some were gentle, soft-spoken women who brought warmth to their surroundings. Others were fiery, confident, women who demanded attention and affection. But no matter who they were or how sincere they seemed, he had turned them all down. There was something about the life he had chosen that made it hard for him to let anyone in. He valued independence more than anything, and he feared that companionship might slow him down, or worse, interfere with the rhythm of his work and the quiet of his life. Still, it was not arrogance or cruelty that kept him solitary. The rancher was kind in his own way. Neighbors would often come to him for advice or assistance, and he never turned anyone away. He helped with fences that had fallen, offered a hand when a tractor broke down, and shared knowledge about the land and the animals. But when it came to matters of the heart, he was cautious, almost protective of himself. He had seen love go wrong, and he had learned the hard way that not every heart was ready to walk beside another on a rugged path. Each day began the same way. The first light of dawn found him in the barn, feeding the cattle, checking for any signs of sickness or injury. He knew each animal personally, and he spoke to them as he worked, though few humans ever heard him talk that way. It was not a lonely conversation. It was a routine, a connection to the life he had chosen. After feeding, he would inspect the fences, making sure there were no gaps or weak spots. The land was large, and a single broken fence could lead to chaos if cattle wandered off. Every step he took, every swing of the hammer, every careful movement across the fields, was a part of a life built on hard work and responsibility. Despite the routine, there was always a sense of anticipation in his heart, though he would never admit it. Some mornings, as he walked along the fence line or mended a gate, he would glance at the horizon and wonder if something or someone might come into his life to change it. But these thoughts were fleeting, quickly pushed aside by the demands of the ranch. Life required attention, and he was good at giving it. Evenings were different. After the long day of work, he would sit on the porch of his modest house, looking over the land bathed in the golden light of sunset. The air would carry the scent of hay and earth, mingled with the faint smoke from the fireplace. These were the moments he truly felt alive, yet also moments when the silence pressed in on him. Sometimes he would think of the women he had met, the opportunities for companionship he had turned down, and he would wonder if he had made the right choices. But such thoughts were dangerous. They could distract him from the life he loved, the land he had worked so hard to maintain. So he pushed them away. Neighbors knew him as a solitary man, and some pitied him. They would gossip quietly about how a man with a good heart, a hard-working spirit, and a handsome face could remain alone. But the rancher did not care for gossip. He was content with his own company, his animals, and the land that gave him purpose. The loneliness he felt was quiet and controlled, never desperate or weak. He had learned to live with it, almost as though it were a part of him, a companion in its own way. Yet there were moments when the loneliness became more noticeable. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled through the valley and the snow blanketed the land, he would sit by the fire and feel a subtle ache in his chest. He would think of someone to share the warmth with, someone to sit beside him and watch the flames dance. These moments were brief, quickly dismissed as indulgent thoughts. He reminded himself of the life he had chosen, the freedom he valued, and the work that needed to be done before morning. Despite turning down every woman who had come into his life, there was something about the thought of companionship that occasionally stirred curiosity in him. Not love in the dramatic sense, not the kind that swept people off their feet in storms of emotion, but a quiet partnership, a shared understanding with someone who could respect the rhythm of his life and the solitude he cherished. But the women he had met before had never matched what he was searching for, and so he remained alone, patient, and careful. The rancher's reputation in the nearby town reflected his personality. He was respected for his work ethic, admired for his honesty, and trusted for his judgment. People would say he had a strong heart, one that could carry great burdens, but they also whispered that he had built walls so high that no woman could climb them. The truth was simpler. He had not yet met someone who inspired him to tear down those walls. The animals on his ranch were a comforting presence. Horses, cattle, and dogs each had their role in his daily life. They provided companionship without complication, loyalty without judgment, and joy without expectation. He loved them not only for their usefulness but for the quiet connection they offered. Sometimes, when the wind blew gently through the trees or the sun touched the hills just right, he would feel a fleeting contentment, a reminder that life could be beautiful even without another human by his side. He had friends in the town, though not many, and he would visit them occasionally for supplies or conversation. These visits were short and pleasant, a brief touch of social life before he returned to the ranch. Even in these moments he remained distant in some way, polite but reserved, always careful not to invite intimacy that could disrupt his chosen solitude. People were drawn to his strength and reliability, but few understood the quiet vulnerability that lay beneath his rugged exterior. One ordinary morning, as he was repairing a fence along the far edge of the property, he noticed a figure on the horizon. At first, he thought it was a traveler passing by, but as the figure drew closer, he realized it was a woman. There was something different about her. Not the casual curiosity of townsfolk, not the timid approach of someone unsure of themselves. This woman moved with purpose, her steps steady, her gaze direct. She seemed to belong to the land, yet at the same time she was distinctly apart from it. He watched her for a moment, curious but cautious. His instincts, honed by years of living alone, told him to keep distance, to wait and observe before making any move. He had turned down countless women before, and he had no intention of making a mistake that could disrupt the life he had built. But there was something intriguing about her presence, something that stirred a feeling he had not felt in years. As the woman approached the ranch, he could see the determination in her eyes. She was not there to ask for charity, nor did she appear intimidated by the vastness of the land or the solitary man who owned it. She came with a question, though he did not yet know what it would be. And in that moment, the rancher, who had spent years turning down every offer of companionship, felt a spark of curiosity, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, this encounter might be different from all the rest. Little did he know, this chance meeting would begin a story that would challenge his solitude, test his independence, and touch a part of his heart that he had long kept guarded. The rancher's life, steady and predictable for so long, was about to change in ways he could not yet imagine. And as the woman drew near, the sun rising behind her, casting long shadows across the land, the rancher felt a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty, a feeling he had not allowed himself to feel in many years. The woman walked steadily toward the ranch, her steps confident and deliberate. She was unlike anyone the rancher had ever met. Her clothes were practical, worn from travel, yet she carried herself with a dignity and strength that immediately caught his attention. There was a quiet determination in her eyes, a resilience that seemed born from experience. The rancher, who had spent years alone, felt a strange curiosity stir within him. He had not expected anyone to appear at this isolated part of his land, much less someone with such presence. As she reached the edge of the property, she paused and looked up at him. The rancher, cautious but intrigued, descended the small rise that led from the barnyard to the main path. He had learned long ago that first impressions mattered, especially in situations that involved strangers. He was ready to greet her politely, to assess whether she was a wanderer, a worker, or someone in need. But the moment she spoke, he realized she was no ordinary visitor. You want a wife or just shelter? She asked, her voice steady, direct, and surprisingly warm. The rancher blinked. The question was blunt, almost shocking in its honesty. He had been approached by women before, often with smiles, hesitation, or subtle charm, but never with a question like this. He studied her face, searching for any hint of jest, but found none. She was serious, and she expected a serious answer. For a moment, he said nothing. He felt a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and even a little caution. His life had been built on routine and independence, and yet in that brief instant, he sensed that this encounter could change everything. He had turned down many women before, and he had done so not out of cruelty but out of self-preservation. He valued freedom and solitude, and he feared that a companion might disrupt the delicate balance of his life. But this woman, she seemed different. He began, then paused. Words felt inadequate. How could he explain the careful life he had built, the solitude he cherished, and the fear of losing it all to someone he barely knew? In the end, he managed only a quiet, "What do you mean?" The woman's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "I mean what I said," she replied. "I've traveled far, I've seen a lot, and I don't waste time on games."
I need shelter, yes. But I also want to know if you're serious about sharing your life, or if you're only offering a roof over my head.
The rancher felt a mix of admiration and wariness. Most people approached life cautiously, but this woman was fearless. Her words were bold but honest, and that honesty intrigued him. He realized that she was testing him, seeing whether he could match her straightforwardness, whether he could be honest with himself. After a moment of silence, he said, "I offer shelter, but nothing more. I've lived alone for a long time, and I've made peace with it. And that's your choice. But I won't stay in a place where I'm not wanted. I've survived on my own before, and I can do it again." There was a quiet strength in her words that the rancher respected. He realized she was not weak or dependent, nor was she looking for charity. She was seeking a place where she could belong without compromising her independence, and somehow that struck a chord deep within him. He had spent so many years turning people away, yet now he felt a flicker of something he had long denied, curiosity about what life might be like with someone truly equal by his side. He decided to give her a chance. Cautiously, "You can stay," he said finally, "but only for as long as you can handle the work. This ranch isn't easy, and it's not for the faint of heart." Her smile widened, not one of triumph, but of understanding. "I can handle it. I've had to handle worse." Over the next few days, she settled into life on the ranch. She carried her own pack of belongings, simple and practical, showing that she was capable of living independently, yet willing to contribute. She quickly proved herself useful, not by asking for guidance, but by taking initiative. She tended to the animals, repaired fences, and learned the rhythm of the land with a quickness that impressed the rancher. He watched her closely, both cautious and fascinated. He noticed how her hands worked skillfully with tools, how her voice carried authority when guiding the animals, and how her presence brought a sense of order and calm to the ranch. She did not try to replace him, nor did she demand attention. Instead, she fit into the life he had built, not as an intruder, but as a complement to it. Yet, it was not just her work that caught his attention, it was her spirit. She moved with purpose, and there was a quiet confidence in every action. When she spoke, she did so with clarity and thoughtfulness, and when she listened, she did so with patience and focus. She had a way of seeing things that he often missed, noticing small details in the land, the animals, and the weather that made life on the ranch smoother and safer. Despite his admiration, the rancher remained guarded. He had built walls for a reason, and he was not about to let them crumble easily. He observed her from a distance at times, noting her routines and habits, wondering what past experiences had shaped her into someone so capable and resilient. He sensed that she carried stories he might never hear, that her past had made her strong, but also cautious. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of the ranch. cattle lowing, wind rustling through trees, and the occasional bark of a dog. It was a peaceful moment, yet neither of them spoke immediately. Words felt unnecessary. The silence was comfortable, a rare experience for the rancher who had spent so many years alone. Finally, she spoke. "This land is beautiful," she said softly, "but it's also hard. You've done well here, taking care of it on your own."
He nodded.
"It's all I know. It keeps me busy, keeps me alive." She looked at him carefully. "And lonely?" He hesitated. Her question struck a chord he rarely acknowledged. He had always told himself that solitude was his choice, that loneliness was a companion he understood. Yet, in her presence, the word felt different, almost heavy with meaning. He avoided her gaze and muttered, "Sometimes. But I manage." She smiled gently. "Managing is one thing, living fully is another. Maybe you're ready for more than just managing." The rancher felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, an acknowledgement that perhaps he had been too rigid, too cautious, for too long. He looked down at the land, then back at her, and realized that her presence made the ranch feel different. It was no longer just a place of work and routine. It was alive with possibility. Over the following weeks, she continued to prove her worth. She adapted to the rhythm of ranch life with ease, often anticipating needs before he mentioned them. She mended fences with skill, tended to the livestock with care, and even managed the accounts of supplies and feed without complaint. The rancher found himself relying on her, not out of necessity alone, but out of a growing trust and respect he could not deny. Yet he remained wary of his feelings. He had been alone for so long that opening his heart felt like stepping into unknown territory. He kept a careful distance, observing her actions, measuring his emotions, and reminding himself of the importance of independence. But she had a way of quietly, persistently breaking through his defenses, not with force or charm, but with competence, honesty, and a calm strength that left him both unsettled and fascinated. Then came a day that would mark a subtle turning point. A sudden storm approached, bringing dark clouds, fierce winds, and heavy rain. The rancher worked tirelessly to secure the cattle and reinforce the fences, and the woman joined him without hesitation. Together, they braved the wind and mud, their movements synchronized as they tackled the challenges of the storm. It was exhausting work, yet it also created a sense of unity between them. In that moment, words were unnecessary. Their actions spoke volumes. After the storm passed, soaked and tired, they sat together in the barn, catching their breath. The rancher looked at her, truly looked, for the first time without the shield of solitude. He saw strength, resilience, and a spark of warmth that made the thought of being alone feel suddenly less necessary. She smiled at him, not with expectation, but with quiet satisfaction at a job well done. For the first time in years, the rancher considered a possibility he had long dismissed. That companionship could exist without compromising independence, that trust could be built gradually, and that perhaps life could be richer with someone at his side. He did not say it aloud, but a seed had been planted, one that would slowly grow in the days and weeks to come. The woman, unaware of the profound impact she had on him, continued to live her life on the ranch with purpose. She asked questions, offered suggestions, and carried out her duties with diligence. But in the quiet moments when the work was done and the sun set over the hills, there was a sense of mutual recognition, an unspoken understanding that this partnership, born of necessity and curiosity, was beginning to take root in something deeper. The rancher, for all his caution, began to notice small changes in himself. He found himself looking forward to her presence, listening for her voice, and even considering the small comforts of shared life. Meals eaten together, stories exchanged, and quiet evenings by the fire. It was unfamiliar yet not unwelcome. He had always believed he could only be complete in solitude. But now, he wondered if he had been wrong. And so, the days passed, each filled with work, quiet reflection, and the subtle growth of trust and respect. The rancher remained cautious, but he could not deny the effect the woman had on his life. She had arrived unexpectedly, asked a bold question, and slowly, patiently, begun to change the rhythm of his days. The ranch, once a place of routine and solitude, was now alive with possibility. And the rancher who had turned down every woman before was beginning to see that some encounters were meant to challenge the heart and expand the life one had carefully built. The rancher had grown used to his routines over many years, yet now those routines were being gently, almost imperceptibly, disrupted. The Apache widow was no ordinary visitor, and he could see it in the way she approached life on the ranch. She was skilled, independent, and unafraid to take the initiative, but she also carried a quiet warmth that began to make the ranch feel less like a place of work and more like a home. It was a crisp morning when she suggested a new arrangement for the cattle grazing. The rancher had always done things one way, believing that years of experience made his methods the best. But she had noticed a section of the pasture that was overgrazed and suggested rotating the cattle more often to preserve the land. He hesitated at first, the stubbornness he had worn like armor for so long resisting the change. Yet, when he followed her suggestion, the results were undeniable. The grass was healthier, the cattle calmer, and the work more efficient. He had to admit privately that her judgment was sound. That admission, though silent, marked the first crack in his walls. He had always trusted himself and his methods, and to allow someone else's ideas to improve his work was a subtle but significant shift. He felt a mixture of pride in her abilities and unease at his own growing reliance on her insight. Their days began to blend together, a rhythm of shared labor that neither had anticipated. She would rise early, prepare breakfast, and move out to tend the animals, while he followed with his own tasks, occasionally pausing to notice how smoothly she handled the ranch. She had a way of observing without judgment, acting without arrogance, and speaking without condescension. It was a balance he had never encountered before, and it unsettled him in ways he did not fully understand. Yet it was not all easy. There were moments of tension, subtle but real, as their personalities clashed in small ways. She was direct, often offering opinions on matters he had long controlled alone. He, in turn, was cautious, wary of giving up too much authority over the ranch he had built himself. Arguments were rare, but when they occurred they were honest and pointed. He sometimes bristled at her boldness, while she occasionally grew frustrated at his reluctance to change. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of fence, a disagreement arose over the best way to handle a stubborn cow. The rancher insisted on one method honed over years of experience, while she proposed another approach, drawn from her own knowledge and intuition. Voices rose, not with anger but with passion and conviction. For a moment it seemed as though their differences might drive a wedge between them. Yet, in the heat of the moment, something unexpected happened. They listened to each other, really listened, and found a compromise that combined their ideas. The cow was safely secured, the fence repaired, and both realized that collaboration, though challenging, could produce better results than either working alone. The rancher felt a quiet respect for her that went beyond admiration for her skills. It was a respect for her courage, her honesty, and her willingness to stand her ground. Evenings became moments of shared reflection. After the day's work was done, they would sit on the porch, sipping coffee or water, and talk about life, the land, and the choices that had brought them to this point. She shared stories of her past, speaking of her late husband with a mixture of sorrow and fondness, revealing the hardship she had endured and the lessons she had learned. The rancher, in turn, found himself opening up about his own history, about failed relationships, the loneliness he had accepted, and the satisfaction he found in tending the land. It was during these conversations that he began to see her not just as a capable worker or a companion in daily chores, but as a person with depth, resilience, and heart. Her experiences had shaped her, but they had not hardened her. Instead, they had made her empathetic, wise, and strong. She had learned to survive, yes, but she had also learned to live fully, and that contrast highlighted what the rancher had been missing in his solitary existence. The more he observed her, the more he noticed small details that revealed her character. The way she moved among the animals with calm assurance, the way she paused to listen to the wind and understand the weather, and the way she treated even the smallest task with care and attention. All these things impressed him deeply. He found himself studying her actions, recognizing patterns, and quietly learning from her methods. It was a subtle shift in the dynamic of the ranch, one that he did not fully acknowledge, but that gradually became undeniable. Despite his growing admiration, he remained cautious. Opening his heart was unfamiliar territory, and he feared the vulnerability it required. He had spent so many years relying only on himself that the thought of depending on someone else, even partially, felt risky. Yet he could not deny the sense of ease and companionship her presence brought. Life on the ranch, once predictable and routine, now carried a quiet excitement, a sense of possibility he had not felt in years. One morning, as they moved through the pastures, she paused to examine a broken post.
"This fence won't hold if the wind picks up," she said. "We need to replace it before the storm comes." He looked at the dark clouds gathering on the horizon and nodded.
"You're right," he admitted. "Let's get to it." Together, they worked quickly, bracing against the wind as they lifted the heavy post into place. Their hands met occasionally, brushing against each other, and though neither spoke of it, there was a quiet awareness growing between them. It was a physical closeness born of necessity, yet it carried an emotional weight that neither could ignore. That evening, after the work was done and the storm had passed, they sat by the fire in the barn. The smell of wet earth and smoke filled the air, and the warmth of the fire was a comfort against the lingering chill. For the first time, the rancher allowed himself to notice the subtle changes within himself, the softening of his guard, the awareness of her presence, and the growing desire to share more than just the chores of daily life. She, too, seemed to sense the shift. Her laughter, once reserved, became more frequent, her questions more personal, her stories more revealing. She was testing boundaries, not in a provocative way, but in a gentle, persistent manner that encouraged him to step outside the walls he had built around himself. He found himself responding, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness, realizing that this connection was slowly, inevitably, reshaping his solitary existence. There were moments of quiet tension as well. He would sometimes catch himself watching her from a distance, unsure whether his feelings were admiration, curiosity, or something deeper. He was not accustomed to such ambiguity, and it unsettled him. She noticed the change, though she never pressed him. Instead, she acted with patience, allowing him space to explore his emotions while continuing to share the rhythm of daily life. One afternoon, as they repaired a section of the barn roof together, a small accident occurred. She slipped slightly, and he caught her hand instinctively. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. Neither spoke, yet the brief touch conveyed more than words ever could. It was a silent acknowledgement of trust, connection, and the growing bond between them. The rancher felt a flutter in his chest, a sensation he had not experienced in years. It was both exhilarating and frightening, a reminder that life could surprise him even in his carefully structured existence. As the weeks passed, their relationship deepened in subtle ways. They began to share meals, not out of necessity, but out of a desire for companionship. They exchanged stories, dreams, and small confidences, discovering common ground in their values, experiences, and aspirations. The rancher found himself laughing more, feeling lighter, and noticing the joy in simple moments. A shared joke, the warmth of the sun, the quiet satisfaction of a day's work done well. Yet despite the growing closeness, boundaries remained. He still valued his independence, and she respected it. They had learned to navigate the delicate balance between connection and autonomy, understanding that true partnership did not require surrendering oneself completely, but rather finding harmony in shared effort and mutual respect. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, they sat together in silence, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. The rancher felt a sense of peace he had never known, a quiet contentment that came not from solitude alone, but from the presence of someone who understood, respected, and challenged him in equal measure. He realized that the Apache widow had become more than a helper, more than a companion in work. She had become a part of the life he had long guarded so fiercely. In that moment he understood that boundaries were not walls to keep others out, but bridges to allow the right people in. And she, with her courage, honesty, and resilience, had crossed that bridge, inviting him to step forward and embrace a life that was no longer defined by solitude alone. The rancher smiled faintly, a small but significant gesture, and the Apache widow noticed. She returned the smile, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. It was unspoken, delicate, and powerful, a promise of trust, respect, and the possibility of something deeper. Life on the ranch continued, filled with work, challenges, and shared moments. But now there was a sense of partnership that neither had anticipated. They were learning from each other, testing boundaries, and discovering that true connection required patience, honesty, and courage. The rancher, who had once turned down every woman, began to realize that sometimes the right person arrived not with grand gestures or promises, but with quiet strength, integrity, and a willingness to meet life as it was, side by side. And so, the rancher and the Apache widow moved forward, navigating the complexities of life on the ranch, building trust through shared effort, and allowing the bond between them to grow naturally, steadily, and inevitably. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and moments of reflection, shaping a connection that was both practical and deeply human, a connection that would continue to evolve as they faced the challenges and joys of life together. The rancher had grown accustomed to the rhythm of life on the ranch with the Apache widow. Their days were long, filled with labor, small victories, and quiet moments of companionship. Yet, life has a way of testing even the strongest bonds. And one late summer morning, a crisis arose that would challenge everything they had built together. It began with the weather. The sky had been unusually dark and heavy for several days, clouds gathering ominously over the distant hills. The rancher, experienced and cautious, had noticed the change in the wind and the scent in the air. He sensed that a storm was approaching, one stronger than any they had seen in months. The animals grew restless, the trees bent with a shifting wind, and the first drops of rain fell, cold and sharp. The rancher immediately went into action. He called the widow, who was already outside tending to the animals, and together they began securing the property. The cattle needed to be moved to higher ground, fences reinforced, and equipment safely stored. The wind grew stronger with every passing minute, whipping across the fields and rattling the barn doors. The storm was coming, and it would be fierce. "This is going to be bad," the rancher said, his voice steady but tense. "We need to act fast." She nodded, her eyes sharp and focused. "Let's get it done." They worked together with precision, each understanding the other's movements without needing to speak. The rancher guided the cattle while she secured the gates and reinforced weak fence posts. The storm arrived sooner than expected, rain lashing down in sheets, turning the ground to mud and making every step a struggle. The wind howled like a living creature, bending trees and shaking the barn. Yet, amidst the chaos, they moved as a team, their combined skills and determination keeping the ranch intact. At one point, a young calf became separated from the herd, trapped near a small ravine. The rancher immediately ran toward it, but the muddy ground made each step treacherous. Without hesitation, the widow followed, helping him navigate the slick slope. Together, they lifted the calf to safety, their hands muddy and trembling from the strain. In that moment, the rancher felt something shift within him, a profound gratitude, a sense of connection that went beyond words. She had not hesitated, had not questioned, had simply acted. After the immediate dangers were addressed, they returned to the barn, drenched and exhausted. The storm continued to rage outside, lightning flashing across the dark sky, and thunder rolling over the hills. They lit the lanterns inside, the soft glow providing a small sanctuary from the raging elements. For a long moment they sat in silence, catching their breath, feeling the adrenaline slowly leave their bodies. The rancher looked at her, truly looked, for the first time without distraction. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he admitted quietly. She smiled, though her eyes reflected the strain of the ordeal. "We did it together," she said. "It's not just me. It's always been both of us." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that for all his years of independence, he had never truly experienced partnership. Not the kind of partnership born of convenience or obligation, but one born of trust, respect, and shared purpose. He had turned down every woman who had come before, believing he could only rely on himself, but now he understood that strength could also be found in collaboration. As the storm subsided late that evening, the rancher and the widow stepped outside to survey the land. Trees were bent, fences damaged, and parts of the pasture flooded. Yet most of the property had survived intact, and the cattle were safe. The storm had tested them, but they had faced it together. There was a quiet satisfaction in their accomplishment, a sense that they had weathered not just the storm outside, but the storms of life that had shaped them both. Later, as they sat by the fire in the small cabin, the rancher finally allowed himself to speak of his feelings, something he had never done before. "I've spent so many years alone," he said, his voice low. "I thought solitude was all I needed, that relying on someone else would weaken me. But today I realize that having someone by my side doesn't make me less strong. It makes everything stronger." She listened quietly, the firelight reflecting in her eyes.
"You've built a life here," she said softly. "A life worth protecting."
But life isn't just about survival. It's about connection, about sharing the work, the struggles, and the small joys. He nodded, feeling a lump in his throat he hadn't experienced in years. "I never thought I would feel this way. But I'm grateful for you, for today, for everything we've done together." Her hand found his, resting lightly on top of his own. "I feel the same," she said. "We're stronger together." And that's how we face the rest of life, side by side. The rancher felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through him, a sense of peace and belonging that he had never allowed himself to feel. He realized that the walls he had built around his heart were no longer necessary. The trust and respect between them had created something far stronger than fear or pride. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly to repair the damage caused by the storm. The rancher marveled at her resilience and determination, how she moved seamlessly from one task to another, always observing, always anticipating what needed to be done next. Together they patched fences, cleared fallen branches, and ensured the cattle had fresh pasture. Their teamwork was precise, yet there was also laughter and quiet conversation, moments of humanity amidst the hard labor. During one evening, as they finished securing the last of the gates, the rancher looked at her with a new awareness. "You've changed everything," he said quietly. "Not just the ranch, but me. You've shown me that life can be more than I thought, that it can be shared without losing who I am." She looked at him, her expression gentle but firm. "You never had to lose anything," she replied. "You just had to be willing to let someone in." It was a lesson he had learned slowly, through shared effort, trust, and the intensity of facing a challenge together. The storm had been a test, but it had also been a revelation. He saw clearly now that the strength he had always valued in himself could coexist with the trust and companionship of another. As the sun rose the next morning, painting the sky in soft gold and pink, the rancher and the widow walked across the fields together. The land was damp from the storm, the scent of wet earth and grass fresh in the air. The rancher realized that he no longer felt the old ache of solitude. The presence of the Apache widow had changed him, shown him a different kind of strength, one rooted not only in independence but in shared effort, trust, and emotional connection. That morning he made a decision he had long avoided. He would no longer see life as something to face alone. He would embrace the partnership they had formed, not as a compromise, but as a choice that made his life richer, more meaningful, and more complete. It was a quiet but profound shift, one that would shape the days and years to come. The widow, sensing his change, smiled gently. She understood that he had faced the challenge not only of the storm but of his own heart. He had learned that vulnerability was not weakness, that reliance on another did not diminish strength, and that true companionship could enhance, rather than threaten, the life he had built. In the weeks that followed, their bond grew even stronger. They continued to face challenges on the ranch, unexpected illness in the livestock, mechanical failures, and the daily demands of the land. But now they did so as a team, with a shared understanding and respect. The rancher discovered a new appreciation for the value of collaboration, the comfort of shared responsibility, and the quiet joy of knowing someone had his back, through both hardship and triumph. One evening, as they watched the sun set over the hills, the rancher turned to her and said, "I've always been careful, always guarded, but I see now that life isn't meant to be faced alone. Thank you for showing me that." She reached out, taking his hand, her grip firm yet gentle. "We face it together," she said simply. "That's all anyone needs." And in that moment the rancher realized that he had found something he had never expected: trust, companionship, and the beginning of love. It was not a dramatic declaration or a sudden change, but a quiet, steady awareness that life could be shared, that challenges could be met together, and that the heart, once guarded, could open without losing strength. The storm had tested them, revealed their resilience, and strengthened their connection. What began as a relationship of necessity and curiosity had transformed into one of mutual respect, trust, and deep emotional connection. The rancher understood finally that he had turned down women before because he had not yet met someone who could walk beside him as an equal, challenge him, and inspire him all at once. The Apache widow had arrived not just to share shelter, but to share life, and he was ready to accept it. The days after the storm passed quietly, but they were filled with purpose. The rancher and the Apache widow moved through the land together, checking fences, repairing damage, and ensuring the cattle were fed and safe. The fields, though battered, were recovering, and so was the rancher's heart. He had weathered storms before, but this one had left a mark deeper than mud or broken fences. It had shifted something inside him, opening a part of himself he had long kept hidden. Life on the ranch was no longer just about survival. It was about shared effort, mutual respect, and the subtle joys of companionship. The rancher noticed it in the small things: her laughter as she worked, the careful way she handled each task, the way her presence seemed to make even the harshest chores lighter. It was a rhythm he had never experienced before, one that made him feel both needed and understood. The community around them had begun to notice the change as well. Neighbors who had once whispered about the solitary rancher now saw him working alongside someone who was clearly more than just a helper. Some expressed surprise, others admiration, but all recognized that something meaningful was happening. The Apache widow had brought a new energy to the ranch, one that was felt not only in the work being done, but in the quiet confidence of the man who had always been known for his independence. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between them grew stronger. They shared meals more often, not out of obligation, but because it felt natural. Conversation flowed easily, ranging from practical matters about the ranch to reflections on life and past experiences. The rancher found himself opening up in ways he had never imagined possible. He spoke of childhood memories, lessons learned from his parents, and the mistakes he had made along the way. She, in turn, shared stories of her late husband, her life with the Apache community, and the struggles she had faced as a young widow. These conversations, simple and honest, deepened their connection, creating a foundation of trust and understanding. One afternoon, while they were tending to the orchard, she paused and looked at him with a smile. "Do you remember the first day you told me I could stay here?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "I remember," he replied. "I wasn't sure I wanted anyone here, and yet, somehow, I couldn't say no when you arrived." Her eyes sparkled. "I knew you'd change your mind eventually," she said playfully. "I just didn't know how long it would take." He laughed, feeling a warmth spread through him. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "You're not like anyone I've ever met. You challenged me, kept me on my toes, and somehow you made me realize I didn't want to be alone anymore."
She reached out, touching his hand gently.
"And I didn't want to be alone either," she said softly. "We've both learned that life is better when shared." From that day forward, their partnership became more intentional. The rancher began to think not just about survival and work, but about building a life together. He recognized that she was not just a companion in labor, but a partner in life, someone whose presence made the ranch feel complete. Their days were filled with shared responsibilities, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. They worked together to improve the land, care for the animals, and prepare for the changing seasons. Every challenge they faced strengthened their bond. Every success was sweeter because it was shared. The rancher also began to notice the subtler aspects of their relationship, the comfort of her presence, the way she understood his moods without explanation, the quiet support she offered without demanding attention. It was a partnership rooted in respect, trust, and shared purpose, and it transformed the way he viewed himself and his life. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, they sat on the porch, watching the sky change colors from gold to soft pink to deep purple. The rancher felt a sense of peace he had never known. The ranch, once a place of solitude and hard work, had become a home in the truest sense, a place of connection, warmth, and belonging. "I never thought I'd feel like this," he admitted quietly. "I thought solitude was enough for me, but now I can't imagine being alone again." "You don't have to be," she said. "We've built something together, and it's only just beginning." As time went on, the community came to accept their partnership fully. Neighbors would stop by to ask about the ranch, offering assistance or advice, and they would be met with the sight of the rancher and the Apache widow working together seamlessly. There were moments of curiosity and even surprise, but those soon gave way to respect and admiration. The rancher, once known for his solitude, was now recognized for the strength and wisdom he had gained through partnership and trust. Life continued with its natural rhythm: sunrise feeding of the cattle, repairing fences, tending to crops, and maintaining the land. Yet amidst the work, there were quiet moments of joy. They would share meals on the porch, watch the stars together at night, and occasionally take long walks across the fields, talking, laughing, and simply enjoying the presence of each other. These moments were small but powerful, reinforcing the bond that had grown between them. The rancher found himself reflecting on the lessons he had learned over the months. He realized that independence and companionship were not mutually exclusive, that relying on another did not diminish his strength, but rather enhanced it. He had once feared that opening his heart would lead to loss or compromise, but he now understood that true partnership required trust, honesty, and the willingness to face challenges together. One day, as they prepared for the harvest season, the rancher stopped and looked at her with a quiet determination. "I want you to know," he said softly, "that you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. I don't just want you here for the work or the chores. I want you here for life." Her eyes widened slightly, and a gentle smile spread across her face. "I've been hoping you'd say that," she replied. "I've never wanted anything else." It was not a dramatic moment, but it was profound. The rancher, who had once turned down every woman, had found someone who matched his strength, shared his values, and challenged him to be more than he thought possible. She too had found someone who respected her independence, valued her presence, and offered a partnership built on mutual trust. From that day forward, they faced life together as equals, sharing both the work and the joys of the ranch. They celebrated small victories, comforted each other during challenges, and learned to navigate the unpredictable nature of life with resilience and grace. The rancher's solitude, once a source of pride, had been replaced by a sense of connection that was richer, deeper, and more fulfilling than he had ever imagined. Neighbors and friends noticed the change. The rancher, once reserved and distant, now spoke with warmth and confidence about the life he shared with the Apache widow. Their story became an example of resilience, partnership, and the power of trust. People admired how they faced challenges together, how they respected each other's strengths, and how they built a life that balanced independence with companionship. As the seasons passed, the ranch flourished under their care. The land recovered fully from the storm. The cattle thrived, and the crops grew healthy and strong. But more importantly, their life together thrived. Every day was an opportunity to strengthen their bond, to share experiences, and to enjoy the simple pleasures of work, nature, and each other's company. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky was painted in shades of gold and orange, the rancher and the Apache widow walked hand in hand across the fields. The ranch stretched out before them, a testament to their hard work, resilience, and partnership. The rancher looked at her and smiled, a feeling of contentment washing over him. He realized that life's greatest challenges had led to its greatest rewards: trust, companionship, and love built on respect and shared effort. They returned to the porch, sitting side by side in comfortable silence. The rancher felt a sense of gratitude he had never known. He had once believed that solitude was enough, but now he understood that life was richer when shared. He had learned that partnership could bring strength, joy, and fulfillment, and that love could arrive in unexpected ways from unexpected times. In the years that followed, the rancher and the Apache widow continued their life together, facing challenges with courage, celebrating successes with humility, and enjoying the simple pleasures of daily life. Their bond, forged through trust, shared labor, and mutual respect, became a source of strength and joy. The ranch, once a symbol of solitude, had become a home, a place of connection, and a testament to the power of partnership. And as the sun set over the hills, casting long shadows across the fields, the rancher knew, without a doubt, that he had found not just shelter, not just companionship, but a partner for life, a woman whose courage, honesty, and spirit had transformed his world, and whose presence made every day brighter, every task lighter, and every moment more meaningful.